Dog and horse swim against the current near Waterfall and do the unthinkable. Susan Johnson woke to desperate screams echoing through Napa Valley, but nothing could have prepared her for what she'd see when she ran to the edge of the Colorado River. Her mare Hope, her companion of 22 years, was fighting against the raging current, dragging her straight toward Eagle Falls. The water was higher than usual due to the previous week's rains, and the force of the current seemed relentless. Susan felt her heart stop when she saw her beloved mare couldn't swim against nature's might. "Hope! Hope!" cried the 72-year-old widow, running along the bank with all the strength her legs could muster. Then she saw something that left her speechless. On the other side of the river, a golden retriever had jumped into the water and was swimming desperately toward the mare. She recognized the dog immediately. It was Goldie from the neighboring ranch, the same dog that belonged to Robert Wilson, the man she hadn't spoken a word to in 15 long years. The dog reached the mare and, with impressive intelligence, grabbed the reins still hanging from the horse's neck. Goldie began pulling with all his might, trying to guide Hope toward the nearest bank. Susan screamed for help, her voice lost in the deafening roar of the nearby waterfall. Her hands trembled as she searched for a way to assist, but age and the current seemed to conspire against any rescue attempt. "Help, someone, please," she shouted again, but only the echo of her own voice answered. Then she heard footsteps running behind her. Turning, she came face to face with the last person she expected to see at that moment. Robert Wilson, her 68-year-old neighbor, stopped abruptly when he spotted her. Their eyes met for a second, heavy with 15 years of hurt and wounded pride. "Susan, what's—" he began, but was cut off by Goldie's distressed barking. The dog was losing strength. The mare, panicking, wasn't cooperating, and her desperate struggles against the current only made things worse. Robert didn't hesitate. Despite all their bitterness, he rushed to the river's edge. "Where's the rope?" he asked quickly, pulling off his shirt. "In the barn, but—" Susan started. "No time." Robert interrupted, and without another word, plunged into the icy river. Susan stood frozen, watching the man she'd considered her enemy risk his life for her animal. The current was far stronger than Robert had anticipated. Within seconds, the water's force knocked him down, and he too began being swept toward the waterfall. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now, back to the story. Desperation gripped Susan. Now 3 lives were in danger: her mare, the brave dog, and the man who, despite all their disagreements, had jumped in to help. She ran back to the house, her trembling legs barely carrying her. Catherine, Pio, she called to her daughter, who'd arrived from Chicago the night before for a visit. Catherine Johnson, 45, rushed from the kitchen at the panic in her mother's voice. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Hope's in the river. Robert's dog is trying to save her, and now he's in the water too." Susan spoke fast, grabbing a rope from the barn. Catherine ran after her mother, trying to make sense of the situation. When they returned to the riverbank, the scene had changed drastically. Goldie, with incredible determination, had managed to guide Hope to a small rock formation in the middle of the river. The mare had managed to brace her hind legs on a larger rock, but was still fighting the current, trying to drag her away. Robert, on the other hand, was clinging to a tree branch hanging over the water, just a few yards from the waterfall. His strength was beginning to fail. "We have to call the vet," Catherine shouted. "I already did. She's on her way," Susan replied as she tied one end of the rope to a sturdy tree. Catherine watched the scene carefully, and something clicked in her memory. That golden dog. She knew him. A distant memory surfaced from when she was a child playing on the ranch. "Mom, that dog. Isn't it the same one Dad gave as a gift to Mr. Robert?" Susan stopped what she was doing and stared at her daughter. "What did you say?" "I vaguely remember Dad mentioning a golden puppy he'd given to someone. I was little, but—" The revelation hit Susan like a bolt of lightning. She faintly remembered Jack, her late husband, mentioning giving a gift to someone, but she'd never known the details. The possibility that her husband had given a dog to the very man they'd fought with years later seemed impossible. The sound of a truck arriving interrupted her thoughts. It was Dr. Elizabeth, the local vet, accompanied by her assistant Mike. "Where's the animal?" Elizabeth asked, jumping out of the vehicle with a medical bag in hand. "Over there." Susan pointed to the rocky ledge, where Hope was precariously balanced. Elizabeth quickly assessed the situation. The mare was clearly stressed, but more concerning was that her belly appeared rounder than it should be. "Susan, when was the last time you examined Hope?" the vet asked. "A few months ago. Why?" "She looks pregnant." Susan's world seemed to spin. Hope? Pregnant? How was that possible? She hadn't allowed breeding, and there were no stallions nearby. At least, not that she knew of. Just then, a shout cut through the air. Robert was losing his grip, his hands slipping from the branch. The current was pulling him relentlessly toward the falls. Mike, the vet's assistant, was a strong 30-year-old man. Without hesitation, he grabbed the rope Susan had brought and tied it around his waist. "I'm going after him," he announced. "No, it's too dangerous," Elizabeth protested, but Mike was already in the water. Unlike Robert, he knew the Colorado River well and understood the safest points to brace himself. With calculated movements, he reached the branch where Robert was clinging. "Hold on to my waist," he shouted to the older man. Robert, his strength nearly gone, managed to grip Mike. Together, using the rope for support, they began moving toward the shore. Meanwhile, on the rocky ledge, Goldie stayed by Hope's side, occasionally barking as if trying to calm the mare. It was a touching scene that brought tears to Susan's eyes. When Robert finally reached the shore, he was exhausted and shivering from the cold, but alive. Susan ran to him without thinking, offering a towel Catherine had brought from the house. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Robert looked at her in surprise. It was the first time in 15 years she'd spoken to him directly, and there was genuine worry in her voice. I'm all right," he replied, still panting. "Why did you do that?" Susan asked, truly wanting to understand. Robert hesitated before answering, glancing toward the river where Goldie still protected Hope. Because it's what Jack would have done." The mention of her late husband's name made Susan take a step back. How dare Robert speak of Jack after all these years of silence and conflict? "Don't talk about my husband," she said, her voice hardening. "Susan, Robert began, but he was interrupted by a shout from the vet. "The mare's going into labor." Everyone turned toward the river. Hope had crouched on the small rocky ledge, and it was clear she was in labor. The already complex situation had just become critical. "I need to get to her now," said Elizabeth urgently. "It's impossible. The current is too strong," protested Mike. Susan looked at her mare, then at Goldie, who remained faithfully by the animal's side. A decision formed in her mind, one she knew could cost her life. "I'm going to her." "Mom, no!" Catherine grabbed her mother's arm. "Hope knows me. She'll trust me more than anyone else," Susan argued. Robert, still catching his breath, stood up determinedly. "If you're going, I'm going with you." "You don't have to," Susan replied coldly. "Yes, I do. Goldie is my dog, and he won't leave without me." Susan looked at him, then at the Colorado River, where the situation grew more desperate by the minute. She knew Robert was right. The dog had bonded with Hope and wouldn't abandon her easily. Elizabeth approached the two with a syringe. "If you're doing this, take this. It's a mild sedative. If you can administer it to the mare, she'll be calmer for the birth and the rescue." Susan took the syringe with trembling hands. Catherine was clearly distressed, but knew trying to stop her mother would be useless. Susan Johnson had always been a determined woman, and once she made a decision, nothing could change her mind. Mike checked the rope one more time and tested it with his own weight. "The rope can hold both of you, but you'll have to go together. It's safer." Susan and Robert exchanged glances. The idea of being so physically close to the man she'd fought with years ago unsettled her, but Hope's life was at stake. "Let's go," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Robert tied the rope around both their waists, ensuring they were connected. If one fell, the other could help. They stepped into the icy water together, and immediately Susan felt the brutal force of the current. "Hold on to me!" Robert shouted, using all his years of ranch experience to navigate the turbulent water. The path to the rocky ledge felt endless. With every step, Susan feared she'd be swept away, but Robert's steady presence beside her kept her on course. It was ironic how, after so long avoiding his company, her life now depended on him. When they finally reached the ledge, Goldie barked joyfully, as if celebrating the arrival of reinforcements. Hope was clearly in advanced labor, her contractions growing more frequent. "Hi, beautiful," Susan whispered to the mare, stroking her neck. "We're here to help." Hope recognized her owner's voice and let out a soft whinny, almost like relief. Susan took advantage of the animal's calm moment to administer the sedative. "Goldie, good boy," Robert called, and the dog immediately ran to him, wagging his tail, even in the midst of danger. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Meanwhile, more people had arrived on the shore. Old Bill, a neighbor from across the way, had brought more ropes and equipment. Word of the rescue had spread quickly through the small rural community. "Has anyone called the fire department?" Old Bill asked Catherine. "Yes, but they'll take a while. The nearest station is 40 kilometers from here." On the rocky ledge, Susan watched Hope with growing concern. The birth was progressing quickly, but the conditions were terrible. The mare needed a calm, safe environment, not a rock in the middle of a raging river. "Robert," she said, her voice softer than it had been in years. "How are we going to get her out of here?" Robert analyzed the situation. The platform was stable, but small. With the birth in progress, moving Hope would be nearly impossible. Maybe it's better to let the birth happen here and then figure out the rescue." Susan nodded. It wasn't ideal, but it seemed like the only option. She kept stroking Hope, trying to keep the animal calm. "Do you remember when she was born?" Susan said unexpectedly. Robert looked at her, surprised. Was she making small talk? "Yes, I do. It was a Sunday morning. I was helping Jack with the back fence." "You were there?" Susan seemed genuinely surprised. "I was. Jack called me to see the birth. Said it was special because the mare was too young to be a mother." Susan processed this information. She didn't remember Robert being present at Hope's birth. In fact, her memories from that time seemed full of gaps. "Robert," she began hesitantly, "why did we really fight?" The question caught Robert off guard. They had never openly talked about the conflict that drove them apart. "Because of the backlands. The surveyor said 5 acres of your property were actually mine." "And you believed him?" "At the time, yes. I really needed that land to expand the pasture." Susan fell silent for a moment, thinking. Then another contraction from Hope grabbed their attention. "She's almost there," Robert observed. "Doctor." Elizabeth shouted instructions from the bank, but the noise of Eagle Falls made it hard to hear. Susan and Robert had to rely on their instincts and years of experience handling animals. Goldie, who had stayed quiet until then, suddenly started barking toward the bank. When Susan followed the dog's gaze, she saw a familiar figure running toward the group. It was Tyler, her 17-year-old grandson. The boy had arrived by bus from Chicago after getting a desperate call from Catherine. "Grandma!" he shouted from the bank. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" Susan called back. "I came to help. I know a safer way to get to you." Robert and Susan exchanged glances. How did Tyler know a safer way? Tyler began taking off his clothes, preparing to enter the water. "Tyler, no!" Catherine tried to stop him, but the young man was already walking toward the Colorado River. "Trust me," he yelled and dove in. To everyone's surprise, Tyler swam safely and confidently to the rocky platform. He clearly knew those waters well. "How did you—" Susan started as her grandson reached her. "Grandma, I come here often. I know every rock in this river." "Often?" Susan was confused. "When?" Tyler hesitated, glancing at Robert. I come here to fish, and sometimes Mr. Robert teaches me about animal rescue." The revelation hit Susan like a bucket of cold water. Her grandson had been secretly keeping in touch with Robert. "What do you mean he teaches you?" she asked, her voice growing tense. Robert stepped in before Tyler could answer. "Susan, it's not the boy's fault. He came to me because he was worried about you." "Worried about me?" "Yes," Tyler said, his voice softer. "Grandma, you live alone on that ranch. You won't let anyone help. I wanted to learn about animal rescue in case you ever needed it." Susan felt like the world was spinning. Her grandson had secretly been preparing to take care of her. Another strong contraction from hope interrupted the conversation. The birth was reaching its critical moment. "Let's focus on hope now," Robert said wisely. "We'll talk later." Tyler, with the energy of youth, positioned himself to assist with the birth. It was clear he really had learned about animal care. "Grandma, I'll need you to hold her head steady. Mr. Robert, can you hold the hind legs?" Susan was amazed by her grandson's maturity and knowledge. Where was the boy she thought she knew? The foal's birth had gone surprisingly smoothly, considering the circumstances. It was a male, small and fragile, but seemingly healthy. Goldie approached cautiously and gently licked the foal, as if welcoming it. "He's beautiful," Susan whispered, tears in her eyes. "Just like his father," Robert remarked casually. "Father? What father?" Susan turned to him. Robert realized he'd said something he shouldn't have. "Susan, I need to tell you something." "What?" "My stallion Thunder jumped the fence a few months back. I searched for him for hours, and when I finally found him, he was in your pasture with Hope." Susan processed the information slowly. "You knew Hope might be pregnant and didn't tell me." "I wasn't sure. And besides, we hadn't spoken in 15 years. How was I supposed to tell you?" Anger began to rise in Susan, but before she could explode, Tyler intervened. "Grandma, now's not the time. We need to get Hope and the foal out of here." The young man was right. The rocky ledge was no place for a newborn to stay long. On the shore, Dr. Elizabeth shouted instructions about handling the newborn foal. Mike had managed to get a second rope and was preparing to help with the rescue. "Tyler," Robert said, "can you swim back with the foal?" "I can try, but he's very weak." "No," Susan cut in. "It's too risky. What if he slips?" Goldie, who had stayed quiet during the birth, suddenly grew alert. He was staring at the shore and growling low. "What is it, boy?" Robert asked. Following the dog's gaze, they saw a pickup truck had arrived. A man in a suit stepped out, completely out of place in the rural setting. "Who's that?" Tyler asked. Susan squinted. "That's Attorney Peterson, the lawyer." The lawyer's presence at that moment seemed odd. What was he doing there? Catherine ran up to the man and began talking animatedly. Even from a distance, it was clear she was agitated. "Mom!" Catherine shouted from the shore. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." "Not now, Catherine," Susan replied. "It's about the land, about the fight with Mr. Robert." Robert and Susan exchanged glances. What had Catherine discovered? "Attorney Peterson brought documents," Catherine continued, shouting. "The surveyor was wrong. The land was always yours, Mom." The impact of the revelation was immense. 15 years of conflict based on false information. Susan looked at Robert, who seemed stunned. "Robert, she began. "Susan, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "The surveyor lied to both of us," she said, her anger directed not at Robert but at the situation. Tyler watched the two adults process the news. "Grandma, does this mean you've been fighting for nothing all these years?" The innocent question cut like a knife. Yes, they'd wasted 15 years of friendship over a lie. Hope, who had remained lying down after the birth, slowly began to stand. Her maternal instinct drove her to protect her foal, even in harsh conditions. "She's trying to get up," Tyler observed. "That's a good sign," Robert said. "Means she's recovering." Susan stroked Hope's neck as she processed everything that had happened that day. Her mare had given birth. Her grandson had revealed secret training, and she'd learned that 15 years of anger were based on a lie. "Robert," she finally said, "will you forgive me?" The question caught the man off guard. "Forgive you?" "Susan, I should be asking for your forgiveness. Even if the surveyor was right, I should never have fought with you like that. We both made mistakes," Susan admitted. "We let pride speak louder than friendship." Goldie, as if sensing the tension easing, approached the two and rested his head on Susan's lap. It was the first time in 15 years the dog had interacted directly with her. "Hi, Goldie," she said, stroking the animal's head. "You're a hero, you know." The dog wagged his tail happily. Tyler smiled at the scene. "Grandma, now that you've made up, can we figure out how to get out of here?" The question brought everyone back to reality. They were still on a rocky platform in the middle of the raging Colorado River, with a mare who had just given birth and a foal only hours old. On the shore, Mike had managed to set up a pulley system using the trees for support. Dr. Elizabeth explained to Catherine how the rescue would work. "First, we'll get the foal out," Mike shouted. "Then the mare." The plan was risky, but it seemed like the only viable option. Tyler volunteered to go first, carrying the foal in an improvised sling. "No," Susan said firmly. "If anyone's carrying my animal grandchild, it's me." "Grandma, it's too dangerous." "Exactly why it should be me. If something goes wrong, I'd rather it happen to me." Robert watched Susan's determination and smiled. "Still the same stubborn woman as always." "And you're still the same protective man as always," she replied, finally smiling at him after 15 years. The first rescue was tense, but successful. Susan managed to bring the foal to shore using the rope and pulley system. The little animal was weak but alive. Dr. Elizabeth immediately began examining the newborn, while Susan, exhausted but relieved, sat on the grass. "He's fine," the vet announced. "He just needs special care for a few days." Now it was Hope's turn. The mare, still weak from labor, would be harder to rescue. Tyler and Robert worked together to position the rope safely around her. Goldie stayed by Hope's side, as if offering moral support. The mare's rescue was more complicated. At one point, she panicked and nearly fell off the rocky platform. It was Goldie who calmed her, barking softly and staying close. "That dog is special," Dr. Elizabeth remarked from the shore. "Always has been," Susan said, her words carrying new understanding. When Hope finally reached the safe shore, everyone cheered. The mare was exhausted but alive and seemingly well. The foal, instinctively, ran to his mother and began nursing. It was a touching scene that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Grandma," Tyler said, stepping closer, "what should we name the foal?" Susan looked at Robert, then at Goldie, who was still watching over the equine family. "How about Unity?" she suggested. Robert smiled. "Unity. I like it." Catherine approached her mother with Attorney Peterson. "Mom, the attorney brought all the documents. The surveyor really tricked us. He had a scheme to stir up fights between neighbors and then buy the land for cheap." The revelation was the final touch in a series of discoveries that had completely transformed that day. "Where is he now?" Susan asked. "In jail," the attorney replied. "His scheme was uncovered last month. We're contacting all the victims to right the wrongs." Robert shook his head in disbelief. 15 years, Susan. 15 years lost because of a con man." "Not lost," she corrected. "We learned something important today." "What?" "That it's never too late to correct our mistakes." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. In the weeks that followed, much changed in Susan's life. Robert became a constant presence at the ranch, helping care for Hope and little Unity. Tyler started visiting more often, splitting his time between his studies in Chicago and learning at the ranch. The bond between grandmother and grandson grew significantly stronger. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" Tyler said one afternoon as they watched Unity playing in the pasture. "Of course." "Why did you never tell me about the fight with Mr. Robert?" Susan thought for a moment. "Because I was ashamed, Tyler. Ashamed of being so stubborn, of letting pride speak louder than reason. And now? Now I know admitting our mistakes isn't weakness. It's courage." Robert approached the two, carrying a thermos of coffee. "Afternoon coffee?" he offered. "Thank you." Susan accepted. "Robert, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "How did Goldie know Hope was in danger?" Robert smiled. It wasn't a coincidence. Every morning, Goldie would make rounds through the neighboring ranches. It was like a patrol he created himself. "Really?" "Yes, and not just that. All these years, he'd come here and watch Hope from a distance. I think he always cared about her. Susan was moved by the revelation. And you knew? I did, but I didn't know how to tell you. We weren't speaking, remember? Robert, Susan said, her voice growing serious, I need to tell you something. What? All these years I never forgot our friendship. No matter how angry I was, I always missed you. Robert was visibly emotional. Me too, Susan. So many times I wanted to come here and apologize, but pride wouldn't let me. Tyler watched the adults' conversation with a smile. You know it's obvious you really care about each other, right? Tyler, Susan protested, blushing. It's true, Grandma. Anyone can see you have something special. Robert laughed. The boy's sharp. Too sharp, Susan muttered, but she was smiling. As the days passed, Unity grew strong and healthy. The colt had inherited Hope's strength and Thunder's intelligence, Robert's stallion. Goldie had become a sort of mentor to the young horse, always nearby, protecting and playing with him. It's amazing how well they get along, Dr. Elizabeth remarked during one of her routine visits. Animals are wiser than humans sometimes, Susan observed. They don't hold grudges. One afternoon, as Susan sorted through some papers on the porch, she found an old box she hadn't seen in years. Inside were old photos of the ranch. Flipping through them, she came across several pictures where Jack and Robert appeared together, working, laughing, clearly great friends. Catherine, she called her daughter. Yes, Mom. Look at these photos. Catherine sat beside her mother and began examining the images. Wow, Dad and Mr. Robert really were close. They were. I'd forgotten how much. One photo in particular caught Susan's eye. In it, Jack and Robert stood beside a pregnant mare. On the back, someone had written, Hope will be born soon. Jack and Robert, partners forever. Mom, look at the date on this. Susan checked. The photo was taken months before her fight with Robert. Catherine, this means that Dad and Mr. Robert were partners in raising Hope. The discovery was devastating. Not only had they fought over a lie, but Susan had kept Robert from caring for an animal that was partly his. That afternoon, Susan walked to Robert's ranch. It was the first time in 15 years she'd set foot on that land. Robert greeted her with surprise. Susan, is something wrong? I need to show you something, she said, handing him the photo. Robert took it and his eyes filled with tears. Where did you find this? In an old box. Robert, Hope is yours too, isn't she? He nodded slowly. Jack and I bought the mare together. Hope was born from our partnership. Why did you never tell me? After the fight, I thought you wouldn't want to accept it, and Hope always bonded more with you anyway. Susan felt overwhelmed by guilt. Robert, I took away your right to watch an animal you helped bring into this world grow up. Susan, don't blame yourself. The circumstances were complicated. No, Robert, I was wrong. Completely wrong. Goldie approached the two of them, as always playing the role of emotional mediator. So now what? Robert asked. Now we'll make things right. Hope and Unity are ours. Both of ours. The proposal of a renewed partnership moved Robert deeply. Are you sure? Absolutely. And more than that, I want you to teach me everything you know about raising horses. 15 years is too much time lost. In the months that followed, the partnership between Susan and Robert flourished. They worked together daily, combining his experience with her determination. Unity became the star of the ranch, an exceptional colt who promised to be an extraordinary horse. Tyler spent every vacation at the ranch, learning about animal care and the importance of forgiveness and second chances. Grandma, he said one day, do you think all this happened for a reason? What do you mean? Hope running to the river, Unity being born, you two making peace. Maybe it was all somehow meant to be. Susan smiled. Maybe, Tyler. Or maybe sometimes life just gives us the chance to fix our mistakes, and we have to be brave enough to take it. Exactly. One morning, 6 months after Unity's birth, Susan woke to a strange noise coming from the pasture. Looking out the window, she saw a sight that filled her with joy. Unity was running freely through the field, with Goldie racing beside him. Hope watched with maternal pride, and Robert was leaning on the fence, smiling as he followed their play. It was the perfect picture of harmony and second chances. Susan dressed quickly and joined Robert at the fence. "Good morning," she greeted. "Good morning, look at our boy." Unity had grown strong and confident, a living testament that beautiful things can emerge even from the most challenging circumstances. "Robert," Susan said, "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For jumping into the river that day, for risking your life for hope, for giving me the chance to fix our mistakes." "Susan, no need to thank me. That's what family does. We protect each other." "Family?" Robert blushed slightly. "Sorry, No, you're right. We are family. Chosen family." Goldie ran up to them, followed by Unity, who had already developed a special fondness for his human grandma. "Hi, handsome." Susan stroked the colt. "You're growing up so fast." Unity nickered softly, as if talking back to her. "He's got his mother's personality," Robert observed. "And his father's stubbornness," Susan laughed. "Hey, Thunder isn't stubborn." "I wasn't talking about Thunder," Susan said, giving Robert a meaningful look. He laughed, catching the joke. Catherine arrived from Chicago that weekend with news. "Mom, I got an interesting call." "About what?" "A famous horse breeder wants to meet Unity. Someone posted a video of him running on social media, and it caught attention." Susan and Robert exchanged glances. "Video? What video?" Susan asked. "Tyler posted it. Didn't you know?" They didn't. Tyler had documented Unity's growth and, without his grandparents noticing, had shared some moments online. "The breeder wants to know if you'd be interested in entering Unity in competitions when he's older." Susan fell silent, processing the information. "What do you think?" she asked Robert. "I think Unity is special, but the decision is ours." "Ours?" Susan repeated, liking how it sounded. "Yes, it's our decision." They decided to meet the breeder, but without any commitments. Unity was still too young for major decisions about his future. The meeting took place on a Saturday morning. The breeder, Mr. Harrison, was an experienced and respected man in the equestrian world. "I've never seen a foal with this combination of strength and intelligence," he remarked after observing Unity. "You have an exceptional animal." "He was born under exceptional circumstances," Susan said. "How so?" Robert and Susan shared the story of Unity's birth, from Hope's escape to Goldie's heroic rescue. Mr. Harrison was fascinated. "This story needs to be told. Horses born under dramatic circumstances often become something special. But we don't want him to become an object of curiosity," Susan made clear. "Of course not. I'm talking about recognizing his exceptional qualities through proper competitions." Tyler, who had come for the weekend, joined the conversation. "Unity loves to run," he noted. "Every time I visit, he wants to show off how fast he is. And Goldie always runs alongside," Robert added. "The dog and the horse share a special bond?" Mr. Harrison asked. "More than special," Susan replied. "Goldie saved Unity's life on the day he was born." The story of the friendship between the dog and the horse impressed the breeder even more. "You have something truly rare here. Not just an exceptional horse, but a story of courage, friendship, and second chances." After the visit, Susan and Robert talked at length about Unity's future. "What do you really want for him?" Robert asked. "I want him to be happy. If competing makes him happy, then I support it. If he prefers just running free in the pasture, I support that too." "And how will we know what he prefers?" "By watching. Unity will show us his path." This philosophy of respecting nature and the animal's desires became the hallmark of Susan and Robert's new partnership. 2 years later, Unity had grown into a striking young horse. Mr. Harrison visited regularly and was always impressed by the animal's progress. "Have you decided about competitions?" he asked during one visit. "We've decided to let Unity decide," Susan answered. "How so?" Robert explained. "We'll take him to watch some competitions. If he shows interest, enthusiasm, we'll consider it. If not, he'll remain our ranch horse." The innovative approach impressed Mr. Harrison. "I've never seen breeders consult the animal before making big decisions. We've learned that forcing decisions rarely leads to happy outcomes, Susan said, clearly referring to more than just horse breeding. The first competition they attended was a small, friendly local event. Unity was fascinated by the other horses, the obstacles, the movement. Goldie, as always, stayed by his friend's side, watching everything with interest. "Look at his posture," Tyler observed. "Unity is paying attention to everything." When one of the horses jumped an obstacle, Unity neighed excitedly. "I think we have our answer," Robert said, smiling. Preparing Unity for competitions became a family project. Susan managed his diet and conditioning, Robert worked on basic training, and Tyler documented the progress. Goldie, unofficially, became Unity's emotional coach, always present during exercises, offering support and companionship. "I've never seen anything like it," remarked the professional trainer they hired. "The dog really understands what's happening." Unity's first official competition was a regional event for young horses. Susan was more nervous than the horse himself. "What if he doesn't do well?" she asked Robert on the morning of the competition. "Then at least he tried. That's what matters." Unity competed with obvious joy. He didn't win, but his performance was respectable for a first-timer. "How do you feel?" Tyler asked his grandmother after the competition. "Proud, so very proud." Goldie greeted Unity with affectionate licks, as if congratulating his friend. In the following years, Unity established himself as a respected competitor, always with his family cheering from the stands and Goldie waiting backstage. But what mattered most to Susan wasn't the victories, but seeing Unity happy and fulfilled. "You know what makes me happiest?" she said to Robert one afternoon as they watched Unity playing in the pasture with Goldie. "What?" "Seeing that he chose his own path, just like we did." "What do you mean?" "We chose to forgive each other. We chose to try again. Unity chose to compete. They were conscious choices, not obligations." Robert reflected on Susan's words. "You're right. The best decisions in life are the ones we make willingly, not under pressure." Goldie, now an older but still energetic dog, ran up to them, wagging his tail. "Hi, my hero." Susan petted the dog's head. "Did you know you changed our lives?" Goldie tilted his head as if he truly understood. "If he hadn't jumped into the Colorado River that day," Robert began. "We probably never would have reconciled," Susan finished, "and Unity would never have been born. And Tyler would never have learned about courage and forgiveness." They fell silent, reflecting on how one brave act from a dog had changed an entire family's destiny. One morning, 3 years after Unity's birth, Susan received an unexpected call. "Mrs. Johnson, this is City Hall. We'd like to invite you to a special ceremony." "What kind of ceremony?" "We're honoring Goldie as the town's animal hero. The story of his rescue spread, and we want to officially recognize his bravery." Susan was moved. Goldie deserved all the recognition he could get. The ceremony took place on a Sunday morning at Town Square. The entire rural community was there, along with local officials and reporters. Goldie, wearing a special collar for the occasion, behaved with dignity throughout, as if he understood the importance of the moment. "This dog represents the best values of our community," the mayor said in his speech. "Courage, loyalty, and unconditional love." When Susan and Robert were called to speak, they exchanged a glance. "You go first," she said. "Let's speak together," he suggested. They stepped onto the stage holding hands, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the crowd. "Goldie taught us it's never too late to do the right thing," Susan said into the microphone, "even when it seems impossible, even when we're afraid. And he taught us that sometimes you have to jump into cold water to save what matters," Robert added. The audience applauded warmly. After the ceremony, many people approached to hear more details of the story. Susan realized their experience was inspiring others to resolve their own conflicts. "You know you're an example for the whole community, right?" a neighbor commented. "How so?" Susan asked. "If you two overcame 15 years of fighting, anyone can get past smaller disagreements." Susan and Robert looked at each other. They hadn't considered the impact their reconciliation might have on others. In the following months, several people in the community sought their advice on resolving family and neighborly disputes. "Seems we've become marriage counselors," Robert joked on one occasion. "Not marriage," Susan corrected. "Reconciliation counselors." "Is there a difference?" "Of course there is." "We're not married." Robert stayed silent for a moment. "Susan, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Would you like to be?" The question caught Susan completely off guard. "Robert, I'm asking you to marry me. After 3 years working together, raising Unity, taking care of Goldie. Susan, I love you. I always have." Susan felt tears welling in her eyes. "Robert, I know it might seem sudden, but we're not 20 anymore. If we're going to be together, let's make it official." Susan looked at Unity grazing peacefully, at Goldie napping in the shade, at the life they'd built together. "Yes," she finally said. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." Robert hugged her, both laughing and crying at the same time. Goldie woke up to the noise and ran to them, wagging his tail as if celebrating too. The wedding happened 6 months later, in a simple ceremony at their own ranch. Unity was the official ring bearer, carrying the rings in a little basket tied around his neck. Goldie was the dog of honor, wearing a special bow tie for the occasion. Tyler gave a heartfelt speech about second chances and true love. "My grandma and my now step-grandpa taught me that love has no age, and sometimes we need to weather storms to appreciate the calm," he said. Catherine cried through the entire ceremony, happy to see her mother so fulfilled. "Dad would be proud," she whispered to Susan before the ceremony. "You think?" "I'm sure. He always wanted you to be happy." After the wedding, Susan and Robert decided to officially establish a horse farm specializing in competition horses, with a focus on animal welfare. "Our edge will be treating every animal as an individual, respecting their personalities and preferences," Susan explained to Mr. Harrison, who became the farm's official advisor. Their innovative philosophy caught the attention of other breeders and the public. Soon, they were welcoming visitors from across the country, eager to learn about their methods. Unity became the farm's ambassador, a champion horse who also set an example of how to treat animals with respect and love. Goldie, now with the official title of Animal Welfare Supervisor, continued looking after all the horses as if they were his own pups. "I never imagined my life would take this turn," Susan said one evening as she and Robert stargazed on the porch. "What turn? Happy, complete, purposeful." "You've always been purposeful, Susan. Not like this. Now I feel I'm making a difference, not just for the animals, but for people too." Robert hugged her. "You've made a difference in my life since the day I met you. Even during those 15 years we fought? Especially then. You made me realize there were things worth fighting for." "Like what?" "Like true love, like real friendship, like the second chances God sometimes gives us." Susan nestled into her husband's embrace. "Robert." "Yes?" "Thank you for jumping into the river. Thank you for letting me jump." Goldie trotted over and lay at their feet, as he always did when sensing his humans were sharing a special moment. "Good night, hero," Susan said, scratching the dog's head. Goldie sighed contentedly and closed his eyes. The next morning, as always, Unity ran to the fence to greet his human grandparents, with Goldie trotting beside him. It was another day at the ranch, another day in a life that had completely transformed thanks to the courage of a dog who refused to leave a friend in danger. The end. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this story of courage and second chances? Do you believe Susan and Robert made the right choice in forgiving each other after so long? Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories like this one. Thank you for your company.